Also, by the way, if you watch that match, if that match happens, that better be the game that when Alfari watches him, makes him just like, you know what? Crack the knuckles. I better get my together, mate. What's going on in the West? Like, you better just come back next split after that on some other team, mate. Like, this is ridiculous. That can't be our top lane talent. Right, this is the newest episode of the Best Damn League show period, even though I will say it is a banger name, because if people don't know, it obviously comes from the old 2000s show that was in sports in America and had a fun concept. The only problem is, though, it actually feels a lot more strained as a name of a show, Dom. Bearing in mind, I watch all these like LPL bangers right before I watch it, and it's like... Even when I say like best damn league, it's like, here's the thing. It's the best show. It's definitely not the best league though. Like every time I watch LPL, it's like, now I know it sounds whack because the LEC obviously has been fun the last few years and there definitely have been some really good like elite teams, but I do almost get the vibe of like, it reminds me when I used to watch LCK and then watch the LCS VODs right afterwards. Like, oh, this is so brutal. Like you have to sort of almost like deprogram, like program yourself like that you're just going to enjoy the game on like a lower level and set all the expectations down and like, oh, it's sad in it. It's sad, mate.
I think I'm at a good place with LEC because in 2019 it gave you like way too much hope. Like you started to just have the expectation where you're like, wow, European teams are going to be like in the finals of Worlds and they can like win international tournaments, and you had all this like junk in your brain. And then nowadays I'm like kind of in a similar place to NA where I'm just like if a European team makes semifinals of Worlds, I think that's like massive. That is a huge fucking accomplishment. And I feel like that's just a more fair way to judge the region than to try to be like, oh, well, you know, they should be the best or they should be like better than LCK like they were for 2 years. You know, it's just...
Yes.
I mean, and not even better than LCK because obviously in terms of depth, LCK was still better. But
no,
in terms
just
of
the best team could outplay some or something. Yeah, exactly. By the way, there's the other thing I think people still aren't ready for. And I pointed this out at the last Worlds, Dom. You know, in the last Worlds, where obviously the only team that got out their group was Rogue, and let's be real, it's in part because of Top like just imploding. It wasn't like they played like the greatest League of Legends ever, right? When that happened, I also realized, like, dude, those years of Fnatic and G2's broke everyone's brain. Like, guys, in the modern day, when 4 LPL and 4 LCK teams go to Worlds, and now we're going to have 2 LCK and 2 LPL teams go to MSI. Like, it's like Dom saying here, dude, just making playoffs or making like, even coming close to an upset is going to again become the goal. Like, you're not going to beat these teams. And even if you do, there's 2 or 3 waiting for you. You're not going to the finals. Like, finals is off the table, mate. You can make the best Western team you want. I don't even know that you could make a final now.
Yeah.
It feels impossible.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of sucks because, right, like everyone's expecting T1 to make the finals of MSI. And then I mean, it's just obvious at this point that OMG is also going to be making the finals of MSI. So like, what can you do, man? Like, what can you do? They're just
so when you've like willed that into existence. And the worst thing is, like, they actually even might fucking, here's the sad thing, right? If people don't watch the LPL, we're obviously going to talk about LEC in a second. He's not even joking anymore. If you actually watch the games, in theory, OMG could be the second team from LPL. It's not impossible. It was impossible a week ago. It's actually possible. That's the worst part. The stupid thing is the fucking BLG team even could do it as well. Like, if you saw them play today, like, it's actually mad how those underdog teams have come from. Yeah.
So this is what I said today on stream. You know, we always talk about investing when we buy low on a bunch of these players that get like, you know, thrown out like IWDominate and people like this that, you know, they get 10th place twice and then suddenly everyone just thinks they're shit. I bought like OMG was my shit coin that went to the moon.
Okay,
I bought them when they weren't even a playoff team in LPL. I'm like, I fucking love this team forever. And people are like, are you just ill? Like, why do you want to just set yourself up for like failure all the time? You could just pick one of these teams that's actually good and have some like joy in your life. I'm like, nope, I love this team forever. This is my favorite team. And now we're starting to get the fucking profits. Like, I'm getting ready to sell, but I think I'll only sell off like a few shares, you know, to still keep the majority of it because I still believe in the team.
Oh. And also, I can't lie, it's just like KT and LCK, Dom. I'm scared as fuck if they go because also the floor of these teams is appalling. But I tell you what, they're exciting as fuck teams. And by the way, I'd even love to see those 2 teams play each other, OMG and KT Rolster. That would be a fucking banger and a half, mate. It'd be terrible League of Legends, but it'd be a hell of a banger.
I don't even know if it would be terrible. It's just like, it's the 2 most opposing styles you could get because when you look at KT, they're a super Korean team. Like, they want to have the game that's 7 kills at 27 minutes where they have like their Malphite top. They're like BDDs playing a champion that's useful throughout the game. They get to an objective fight. They outplay you at the objective fight. They win the game. And OMG just wants to fight you from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And like, if they win more of the fights than they lose, they probably win the game. That's the style of OMG. So, I mean, it's just the most fun team to watch for me. And that's like the reason why I actually liked them in the beginning. It wasn't just like I picked the team and I was like, oh, this is just a meme. Just what I like about League. I think that it's sick when people play champions that other people don't play and just shit on people with them in competitive. Like, I think that that's just a very cool identity.
If people have never watched the LPL, by the way, all I'll say to wrap it up is, if you don't know the OMG team, because they're not famous names, basically the player Cream, who's the mid laner, is like, obviously he's much better, but he's like the leader of the LPL. Like his actual like pop-offs are fucking crazy. You've got to watch it. Like he's got some really entertaining matches. So it's one of those players, you're not going to know him by name because he plays for OMG. Sadly, he's not really relevant now, except they've done this run. But that guy is fucking really interesting to watch for sure. He's definitely fun.
And then he also has the same identity with the melee mid laners that Leader does, where when he came into the split, one of the things that I loved about him is that he was just playing a melee mid laner regardless. So it was like, I'm playing Yasuo. If I'm not playing Yasuo, I'm playing Kiana. If I'm not playing Kiana, I'm going to play Silas. If I'm not playing Silas, I'll play Akali. Like that was just his identity as a mid laner. I just thought it was so cool to see somebody kind of like break the mold where, you know, at this time, people are playing so much of these control mage champions. Like you're seeing Syndra and Orianna and Azir over and over again. And then some dude just shows up like Kiana. It's like, wait, that champion can't lane. How do you get through a lane as Kiana versus Syndra? It's like, watch me. I'll just go down 10 CS and then I'll kill him at level 6.
What we'll do is we'll segue that because obviously we're going to talk about the groups of LEC, and in those groups we can actually just do exactly that pivot. Obviously Leader is in the groups of LEC, guys. He plays against Fnatic in the opening match. And what's crazy to me, we touched on this a little bit on the last episode with the guest with Doffman, but if you look at these groups, because what we're going to do on this one is break down the matchups, like look who we think our 1 and 2 is going to be, that sort of thing. If you look at the group A, I made this point last time, even though, look, the way the actual split went had a lot of parity and understandably, you know, like sometimes you get what looks like bad seeding because you just get unlucky. Like, you know, the wrong person's number 2, the other person's number 3. And it just ends up that in these groups, at first glance, Group A looks way easier than Group B. Even though when you go look at the placings of the team, it's totally fine. Like, this does make sense. Like, the way the seeding works out and the way the selection works all makes sense. It's just when we talk about the best of 3s, this is the key thing I want to set as the framing at the beginning of the episode. I'm like you, Dom. I look at the BO1s and I mainly take that for like, I'm mainly just looking who are the 2 worst teams you get kicked out. And beyond that, I'm just looking for like tendencies, like how do you play generally, like what lanes. I don't personally take too many judgments away from where you placed in the best of ones, because to me, like for example, Vitality is a great example when we get to them in a minute. I've never seen this Vitality lineup play anything more than a best of 1. How the fuck do I know they're going to play? I can speculate. There's all sorts of interesting angles, but I won't judge them too harshly because they lost a few BO1s. Meanwhile, on the other side, when we talk later about BDS, I'm probably not as confident, despite the fact they did a great job in the best of 1s, that they're going to get out of this group. So if we start with the first matchup here, the Astralis versus Fnatic one, right? What's wild is Astralis have a very real chance to get out of this group. In fact, I have to say, Dom, I think they're going to beat Fnatic in this best of 3. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I also agree that they're going to beat Fnatic because when you look at how Astralis played the game, they have a much, like, the way that they win is way more convincing than the way that Fnatic wins. Fnatic has won games by having better drafts than teams. Like, they'll just come in with, like, a mega fucking draft where they have full kite back, like Braum Sejuani against full dive, and it's like, god damn, how hard is it for the other team
like
to win
that guy
game?
Who's Freeze's brother? Seems like he's done a good job so far, mate. Seems like he's sort of figured out what their identity is, at least.
Definitely. And even though like you can't take too much away from the like docu-series that they have, the behind the scenes, you could just tell by how the players look at him. Like you can see that they just respect him more and they're listening more attentively to what he's saying than what they were, than how they were behaving when Crusher was the coach. So I think that there's definitely more buy-in from the team, and it seems like the team is just happier. Like when you see like Reckless,
for sure,
just, in general, like on camera, he's smiling more. He's like, you know, after the game's over, he goes and he gives Oscar a hug. He just seems like he's more in it than he was in the last split. So I think that Fnatic is definitely, they're looking like they have like a better vibe about them, but Astralis has actually put together a lot of good League of Legends games. Like they have a distinct style. They have 1-1-3 ganking all the time. I think that if you look at the matchup specifically, I think the bot lane is a massive advantage for Astralis. I mean, Astralis has just had one of the better bot lanes in the entire split. And I mean, these teams have played I guess only twice now, but when you've seen the matchup between Kabi and Reckless, it's been strongly Kabi sided recently. So when you put everything together, I just feel like there's almost no advantages for Fnatic outside if like Skarinen keeps up with like a really high level and Finn has one of his, you know, bad series that he's always prone to having. Outside of that, I don't see any real distinct advantages for Fnatic besides for maybe like champ pool mid lane. Like maybe if Humanoid is playing a lot of LeBlanc, that's good into a lot of leaders champions, or if you know Astralis ends up playing a lot of this like really early game dive stuff and then Fnatic gets a better draft, that's probably how they win the series, is getting a couple games like that. But when you look at just gameplay wise, Astralis is way more cohesive as a team. They're much better in terms of like how they set up the map. Their macro is significantly better, where you can still see chinks in the armor of Fnatic when they end up getting into these fights, because they'll have a perfect identity. You'll look at the game, you'll say, hey, this is they should just be able to play the fight front to back. Enemy team engages, you just kite back. And even when they have comps that have those advantages, it's like they don't recognize it in the game. They're not playing specifically for that. They'll try to engage too far. I don't think that Razork is as disciplined as other junglers. It seems like he still kind of just feels like he needs to go in no matter what. And a lot of fights he'll just die when he could just, play to stay alive. Like, you don't need to take the fight in like one go where, hey, we're fighting and we just fight until we're dead. You don't need to do that every single time. So I think that there's less discipline on Fnatic. But who knows? I mean, Astralis obviously have players that have not played as many series. They haven't won series the same way that Fnatic has. So maybe some of that veterancy could be big in a best of 3.
Bro. I mean, if you notice, that's why it's dark days if you're a Fnatic fan. Because as Dom says, even when they won the games, they didn't look like super awesome. I'll give them credit. They looked good again in the G2 game, obviously, because that was a fucking bang and they could have ended it earlier. But even then, I'd say that was the game they should have closed. Like, they almost made it fucking questionable with all those, like, stupid individual pushes on the Nexus. Like, you could have easily closed that game out. So even that was a bit sus to me, because that was, like, sort of your best win of the split. And I'm with you. Essentially, the only angle you can really come down to for Fnatic is, like you say, they've just got veteran players, and maybe the veteran players hold their nerve in the series. Because I'm with you, mate. If you actually look player for player, right? Even the Oscarinin one versus Finn isn't even a slam dunk. Like, we haven't seen that many good games of Oscarinin. He had a few. It wasn't like he's had a whole split. And then also, I previously, before this split, would have said the obvious mismatch Dom's jungle, like Razork, if he has a pop-off game, way better than 113. I'll give credit. 113's doing a fucking Adam on me, mate. Like, actually, over this split, he's gotten way better, hasn't he? Like, and crucially, when you say their style of play is cohesive, dude, he's part of it. He actually looks like he's on the same page and knows what he's doing in the game now. Like, this guy, if people didn't see him before, looked so fucking bad in the last split. Like, it was the last split. Remember, they didn't have leaders.
The
well,
games
guys.
he lost specifically,
it was just fucking like Kobe who was carrying those games. Like, this team has Kobe, fucking leader. Now 113's even has like a logic as to how he plays. Like, man, this team's actually better. This is the sleeper in the groups, in my opinion. So I say I could see a world where they could maybe sneak past Mad Lions. We'll have to see on that matchup if it ends up happening, obviously. But like, I think people are going to look at them and see the name Astralis and be like, there's no way they're going to. It's like, this is a sleeper, dude. Like, these ones, they deserve more credit, I think, as a team.
Yeah, definitely. They deserve more credit as a team. And like we said last week, 113 is just in the zone. You can tell that when he's playing the game, he has like an idea, and a good idea, for how he wants to get ahead in every single game. He might not be the guy who's going to be able to translate that necessarily to like macro and winning the game and like him getting the kills. He's not going to solo carry 1v9, but he doesn't need to do that with his team. Like, he has solid pieces around him. So if he can just go and get the team an advantage, they're probably going to win out. It seems like they played the map well when they have leads. And I think that 113 and Leader are kind of just built for each other. When you see the way that Leader wants to play the game, he's the type of guy that wants to just like get it down to, okay, I'm gonna open up this window, level 3, come to my lane, like gank here, the guy's dead, we get a kill, move on, we just get a lead and we play off this later. He wants to just keep on being active throughout the game. He doesn't want to sit there and farm, and 113 wants that direction. Like, he wants to kill people too, he just doesn't know where he wants to kill people necessarily all the time. And if he ever is like, he's good at making plays around the map. If he knows he can punish somebody somewhere, that's fine. But if he doesn't have anywhere to go, Leader is the guy who will call him mid and be like, yeah, just kill him on this wave, like we'll flash on him here, at least burn his flash, it's good for me. He's able to give him some direction in the early game so that he always has something to fall back on.
Also, even though obviously whenever you talk about coaches, you're just speculating. I've heard so many things from the smaller coaches and players about that AOD guy who's the coach of Astralis. Like, they all rate him, and I have to say, he looks like he's done a pretty good job with the players he's been given, mate. Like, and he overperformed last split in the winter one. It looks like he's overperforming now. It seems like he's doing a decent job. Not much more to say than that. Just thought I'd shout him out, since when you're on a smaller squad, if you do well, I like to give you props,
Definitely.
Right. The problem I have is this. Right, when we do the other matchup, the Vitality Mad Lions one, right, here's where I'd start on this. Like, I'm obviously favouring Vitality. I actually think, as a bigger topic, I think they're actually somehow we're getting underrated. I don't know how that's possible. I guess people just go by the BO1s and like, they left to that team or whatever. Like, the thing is, Mad Lions is probably themselves slightly underrated in the sense that here's the thing, Dom. Logically, they should be better than they were in the fucking season part, the BO1s, right? You're not expecting that Mad Lions to top. Like the thing is, the roster of players could be so much better than they showed in those games, right?
It's true that they could be better, but when you consider the way that these teams have interacted, I feel like Mad Lions' strengths match up extremely poorly into Vitality's strengths. I think the Vitality just have Vitality wants to fight you the same way that Mad wants to fight you, but Vitality players are just better. And when you look at the games that they played against each other, they've been extremely Vitality sided. I just feel like they all kind of have the other guy's number. So when they interact, it's very hard for like Mad Lions to get a consistent advantage. And if they ever end up having their like int plays, which Mad Lions had a ton of int plays this year, it seems like Vitality punishes them way harder than other teams do. So the individual matchup, I think, is extremely hard for Mad Lions. I don't know. I just think that they're kind of gapped everywhere besides for mid, and I mean that's even close.
That's about it. That's about it, I think.
Yeah,
they kind of gapped everywhere.
Yeah, I mean they lose top, right? I mean Photon's just essentially a better version of Chasey, where it's just like they're both the import guys that have pretty good mechanics that are good at the game, but Photon's just better and he has a bigger champion pool. Upset is in a different league than Carzzy. They're nowhere close.
Maybe Jungle's closer, I guess, but then again, it's how you work with your team.
Yeah, Jungle's pretty close, but I don't think Elyoya likes playing against a player like Bo. I think Elyoya would rather play against people that are like not as crazy. He wants a more comfortable game where he doesn't have to like mechanics check you, where he could just kind of outplay you by using his brain. I think Elyoya, even though he has good mechanics, he's somebody who's more comfortable in terms of like pathing and just being smart about the game. That's where he likes to find his advantages. So just overall, when you look at the whole team, I just don't think that there's any really comfortable matchups. And Nisqy versus Perkz it's a toss-up. I don't think that Perkz is like much worse than Nisqy. I think that Nisqy has just been slightly more effective overall.
Because the thing is, I'm taking Vitality to win the series, but my feeling is just that like there is a world I could see Mad Lions being better than they were in the season part, the best of ones. And so people are going to forget it, but like Nisqy and Elyoya are good players. Like they just are. Like Elyoya is still one of the best junglers. The rest of the team, I'm a bit more questionable. Here's the real problem they have in this group is I actually think, Dom, that in this match against Vitality, I'm with you. I don't really know how they win. But Mad Lions against either Astralis or Fnatic, dude, suddenly actually like they've got very good chances. Like those are the teams where they do probably have the better jungler. The Chasey guy probably is the better top laner out of those teams, right? I mean, we've yet to see more of Oscar in there, I guess, but Chasey can be a coin flip, but when the coin lands on heads, he can win. So like I feel like that's the thing I'm interested in. I don't think Fnatic can get second, but in my opinion, Astralis or Mad Lions, I could see angles for both teams coming out of this group second. Who would you favor if they play?
It's tough because it should be Astralis. Astralis are playing better league. Like their games make more sense, but you just always, it's hard to think about the clutch factor of just having players that have, won before. Like you see, like, for example, the Hilly Pike game that he played in the last week, where it's like, there's always just games like that you can lose. And it's not a best of 5, it's a best of 3 where, if they just catch you off on one game and then you maybe throw one game, that could be your whole series. And you might even look better than the team and lose. It could be like that fucking BLG JDG series we just watched, where it's like, is JDG better than BLG? Like you don't feel like it after watching it.
No.
But they could have just won because Astralis could make mistakes. They could just get in their own way. So it's very close for me. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Fnatic the Fnatic ship is just completely sailed. Unless they get some mega drafts, it's very hard for them to get out of these groups. I mean, the other teams just have them gapped almost everywhere individually.
Yeah, the other thing that sucks for them is like, dude, it's not even a joke. Like you've picked all the teams where, like you say, the exact positions you need for that to be strong. They're just fucked. Like all these teams have them covered.
Yeah, it's hard for them for sure. They just have to. I mean, hopefully they come up with something that we haven't seen in a while. Maybe they have a certain way they want to play the game. Maybe it's a reckless Sivir 500 CS win con, or Ascarin has something that he wants to play that he's able to really just exploit a bad team comp on. Like maybe he just pulls out the GP again or something, and it looks really good in a game. I think it would have to be somehow like a draft related win into like confidence boost and another team slightly choking, which is kind of what I think could be the problem with Vitality, right? Like if Vitality don't get out first in this group, it's once again something where I'm just going to be like, yeah, they played worse than they were expected to. There's no real excuse. Even if the other teams play well, they should just win.
Yeah. Especially because remember, every convo about Vitality, we're also projecting like if they go to MSI, what would they do and all that. So like playoffs is a minimum. I agree with you. With this particular group, they have to win the group. Like they just should. If you look at the teams in it, like if they're not going to win this, then why would they win the playoffs? I can't really see how logic. Like there's not that much going to change in 2 weeks, guys. Like if they can't win this group, forget them beating G2 and winning playoffs. I think they're going to cruise this group, though, personally.
God, I mean, you know, when we were talking about this, the one thing that I keep on thinking about is if Mad somehow make it out of this group, they're almost guaranteed at MSI unless G2 lose finals. Like it's very hard for them to not make MSI at that point because of all the fucking points they have. I just don't want to see this Mad Lions team go international. I don't have faith in them. Like I would rather see almost any other. I'd rather see BDS, Astralis, Vitality, like almost any other team. I would rather see at MSI besides for like Mad or Koi and just like in the states that they are right now. I feel like it's just going to be sad as somebody who wants to see EU succeed. So that's the one thing that it kind of sucks because I guess I'm slightly favoring Mad to like play better, like maybe not get out, but they'll play better. And if they make it out, man, if Astralis chokes, like the whole fate of EU might be in Astralis's hands.
I mean, this is basically that same shit we've had twice before in Europe. If you remember, a couple of years ago, it was where Rogue didn't have to win any bloody games, and they went to that Worlds. And then obviously last year, it was Mad did the same thing, Dom, where they didn't beat any of the top teams. They just went to Worlds because of the thing. Like, that's the flaw, unfortunately. Basically, if people don't know, there's not a way around it, unfortunately. Because essentially, if you don't ever want this to happen, then you just do what they used to do when Summer Split was the Worlds qualifier. You essentially make it that the last matches of the split determine who goes. So in this case, you'd have to make it the final of spring. 1 and 2 would be the MSI teams. But the reason they don't do that, guys, is because they want the other split to count. So for the other split to count, unfortunately, it always opens the door that you can have this happen. A team that actually was good then, but isn't good now, gets through the gap. Because unfortunately, that's actually how you've designed it. Because what you're trying to design it for, unfortunately, is when Mad Lions came second, right? Like I've said in the past episodes, they weren't really like a proper second place LEC team. They were one of the weakest teams to have been in the finals in years, Dom. Like, normally the teams in the final of LEC are pretty good. That was a pretty weak Mad Lions team. But let's say that had been a good team. The way that this normally is supposed to work in your favor is if they just had a slight slip up here, but then they get through. But they're actually, like a proper good team. They just need time to rev up again. The problem with Mad Lions is I don't think they were ever fundamentally good. So yeah, as you say, the fact that they've got this kind of like sus group means basically to go to MSI, they probably just have to beat Astralis and fucking Fnatic. Like what? The what? Invested. That's it. If they do that, they go to MSI. Basically, that's a bit whack. I will say when you say it like that, it's brutal, isn't it?
It's pretty crazy. Then also the way that you felt about that final. I don't know how you felt watching it, but it felt like Mad Lions got to that final based off like vibes alone. They were like, oh, we got the Gragas thing going. Like, oh shit, Hilly. Like they're like laughing on stage and stuff, having a good time. Koi looks really stressed. Like Vitality is a complete collapse. SK was never supposed to even be there in the first place, and Mad Lions narrowly beat them. It's tough because you never actually watch Mad Lions and you're like, this is what they do like super well. It's just like they're kind of good, I guess. They just felt like okay. Like that's the way I would normally feel about a team that's like 5th in LEC. I would normally have that type of feeling towards them where they're not bad per se, but they all like it's like XL from like XL when they play 6th in summer. It's like that same type of thing where it's like they're not bad, but they don't do anything well where you could be like, oh, this is their angle. This is how they could beat teams that are better than them.
I'm also just so scared about what we'd like at MSI if Mad Lions goes. Like, bro, I can't have Mad Lions playing against T1 and fucking like. What's it going to be like? It's going to be so stupid, isn't it? Like, if you don't know, guys, they're going to get absolutely torn apart, like destroyed completely.
Look, as somebody who covers all the regions, Golden Guardians might make it. So EU, don't feel bad. You might have one win because Golden Guardians legitimately could make it. So you might end up having like Licorice versus Chasey in a fucking international tournament.
Brilliant, brilliant.
That might be the angle.
Also, by the way, if you watch that match, if that match happens, that better be the game that when Alfari watches him, makes him just like, you know what, crack the knuckles. I better get my shit together, mate. What's going on in the West? Like, you better just come back next split after that on some other team, mate. Like, this is ridiculous. That can't be our top lane talent. It can't be Licorice versus Chasey, please.
I mean, look, all I'm saying is with how things have looked in North America right now, I think even TL would want Alfari back. They're like, you know, this whole Korean thing, this didn't work out as well as we thought. Like,
yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's rough. Bwipo as well. Like, you felt better about
dude, it's actually mad the talent that isn't playing in that thing. Think about it. Odoan is Elo held in XL. Alfari's on the bench. Bwipo's just sort of semi-benched himself with the shenanigans and offset. Like, where's all that? Just bring them all back. Bring all the boys back. Think how good LEC would be if these guys all came back. Like, imagine, by the way, just think of this. Here's an obvious example. Like, imagine if you put one of these players on Astralis. Dude, that team would start to look pretty fucking good. Now you'd be cooking with gas if you put like a big name top laner on that team. And it's not a bad team anymore.
That's all the people that we can buy right now. We just got to sort it out. Like how low are we buy? Because there's Whippo, there's Wonder, there's IWDominate, Alfari.
Dude, you can even argue, to be fair, that Whippo could come back at 2 roles even. You know, take your pick and come out of jungle, right? I think a lot of people would try that experiment again if it was the right team, right?
Dude, I just saw somebody in the chat tried to sneak Cabo Shard into that tier.
How dare you?
Yeah, you motherfucker. You thought you could just slip that one in and no one would notice?
Like, here's the thing. I was on that train for the last few years, but that was like, I've been saying that for 4 years or something now, guys. Like, you got to let that one go eventually. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, I can't keep living off what he did like 4 or 5 years ago, can I? Like, at that point, fuck it. Bring Frogger back as well. There you go. I don't even know if he plays League of Legends anymore. Just bring him back too. Unforgiven. Is he around still? Fuck it. Bring him on. Expect here. Where's he at? How far back are we going on this exactly, guys?
Jesus.
Fnatic may not be legit, but I'll tell you what is, and that's Freeze Pipe. I don't know what they were smoking in the management when they signed that roster, but perhaps they'd have made a better decision and enjoyed the outcome more if cooler heads had prevailed. That's where Freeze Pipe's technology comes in. Take the food-safe glycerin chamber and put it in the freezer for an hour, and you'll be able to enjoy a smooth, irritation-free experience when you smoke cannabis through your bong, bobbler, or dab or oil rig, all of which they sell on their site. What's more, you can get 10% off your order with the code LFN at thefreezepipe.com. As you can see on screen, obviously 420 is coming up this month, and they have a sale on a number of different items. So check it out. Thanks to thefreezepipe.com. LFN's your code to get 10% off. Who wants to end up irritated like the Fnatic sub? Well, then again, who wants to be like the Fnatic sub? Instead, be someone who enjoys smoking cannabis the cooler way. By the way, let's do the Vitality one for like bigger though. Like essentially, what do you think about, like, we're both assuming Vitality is going to get out of the group, right? Do you actually think they, because for me, I think they're the only team that has a chance to beat G2 once we get to the best of fives, the next phase, obviously. Because the problem is it's the best of fives. Like some of these teams, like, yeah, in this group, some of these teams, we'll talk in a second, maybe they can cause an upset, they can get a 3-gate. I think the only one is Vitality who can beat them in a best of 5.
Yeah, I mean,
Would you put another team in that category?
Think about the other teams. So Koi and Mad look like absolute shit.
Yeah.
You have Astralis, BDS, which are, they're the teams that place top 2, but like, are you really going to take either
possibly
of them? Possibly
fraudulent as top 2, of course.
Yeah. SK has had a worse split. Like, who else can you even put there? Like, you literally can't put anyone there. It has to be Vitality. The only hope is Vitality.
Yeah, it's basically just, you have to be a massive believer in SK to turn it around, or that BDS is for real. That's it, right? They're the only two sort of scenarios that make them capable of winning.
It's tough. It's weird because it feels like a lot of teams are simultaneously underperforming right now in Europe. Like, you would expect Koi to still be pretty good. Like, people had them winning the split or being top 2 guaranteed because you keep so much of their roster. Then you just watch the play. They look like shit. Mad, who, you know, had a pretty good winter split, all things considered. Like, you want to see them build on that. Maybe they become stronger. Like, that's a good finish. They develop momentum. They end up playing better in spring. They've fallen off. Vitality has these games where they just look absolutely awful. And then the other two teams that are looking reasonable are like BDS and Astralis. It's very hard to feel like any of the second teams are legitimately good. I mean, G2 look like they're legit good. Like, they would be one of the teams that you could see taking a series or taking like games off top tier teams because of the way that they play. They have like a unique play style. I can't imagine Vitality beating any of the top teams in the world right now. Like, even if JDG played a bad game, like played one of their shit games that they just played against BLG, would Vitality actually win that game? That's what I think. And unless they were having, you know, just a game where Bo's just getting super far ahead, the bot lane's winning and everything, one of those dream games, I just think it's very hard for them to win.
The hope for me with Vitality is this. It's not that when they joined the league, guys, I thought from day one they'll be the best and never lose a game. It's that, remember, this is the first split that they've had upset in the lineup. Already things look more positive. To me, they just have to level up each phase of LEC. So best of one's still pretty good. Couple of flaws. If they get better in best of 3, if there's still time to arrive at the playoffs, and by the time you get to the finals, it'll be better. So that's the hope for me with Vitality, is if they level up to like max power. If they get to the top level, like the lineup's mega on paper, it has to all work, doesn't it? They've only, I would say they've sort of had half their games looked really good, and then half were like good to a point, but then like had a failure, or someone just got outplayed by the other team. Sometimes that happened a couple of times in the big matches. So I think it's plausible. The only thing is, though, on the Vitality tip, I do also have concerns that, like, let me think how to say this. Basically, I actually want to know how they are going to resolve the obvious problem of having all those good players. Like, at some point in time, they also do have to, you have to sort of eventually get a bit cynical and choose your identity and like who you're actually going to play through and who you're going to draft towards, right, Dom? Because at the moment, they can do it, because you can do anything. I mean, in theory, it has to eventually just be like fucking go through upset or whatever. But yeah. At the moment, they've been trying to play the game, I feel like, as well, Dom, when he just came in the lineup. Because you normally do that when you have the rep that you're supposed to be the arrogant guy who wants all the resources. You have to almost like go, no, do you take a top lane carry, Photon? Have one. I love helping my team. But the point is, when it comes down to brass tacks, eventually you have to fucking do the most obvious setup of the team, right? And if they play through upsets, it's the best chance to win. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just also like my theory on the game right now. Like they nerfed Dragons slightly. They took like 1% off, or they nerfed it by like, I guess 10% is what they nerfed all the Dragons by. It's just the best way to play the game, play through bot. Soul is still mega OP. Stacking Drakes is still mega OP. Like the game is just better played through bot right now than it is than it is when you try to play through anything else. So for me, it's not even so much about like, oh, like, is it because we have upset that we need to play through bot? It's no, just you watch like every fucking good team. Everyone plays through bot. You can play top lane carries, but you don't play hard for them throughout the game.
Yes.
Maybe you give them one gank to get them ahead. Maybe you like play around them at a certain time to like burn an ult before Rift Tail. Like it doesn't mean you can never go top. It's just the majority of the time you're playing with your bot lane. You're making sure your bot lane is stable. You're covering them from dives. You're getting vision around bot lane so you can contest dragons. That's just the way that all the teams play in the world. I mean, you look at T1, they're considered the best team in the world right now. What do? They have Faker play champions that roam well. They have junglers that are good early game. They play winning bot lanes. They stack waves and go bot as 4. That's just the identity of winning teams right now. And the game is set up like that. If the game changes, sure, you could change, but most people play the game the same way for a reason. It's not because bot laners are just like too whiny and they just ask for ganks all the time. It's because that's just the way the game is set up. People knew over time, ever since Soul came in, ever since Dragon Soul became super OP, you can't really cross map. You can't play hard for split. Even if you are winning split, you're going to have to go and join the team fight at some point. You win split in order to be first to the team fight, maybe get a TP advantage one time, then the next time you actually win a team fight. You don't play split to actually take the turret in front of somebody like in the old days where it'd be like, oh, I'm just taking this turret and that turret, and oh, they can't, like the Shen just can't contain the Fiora. The Fiora's taking the whole turret in front of them. It's just not League anymore. Like the game is just centered around Drake, which means that bot lane is OP.
Plus, if anyone's watched any of the other regions in the world, that's the option that Vitality has that a lot of the other teams don't, which is that at any moment, no matter what trouble they're in a series, you can just get a draft around a Zeri and just have the fucking ADC hard carry the game. Like, it's happening in all the major regions with all the stud AD carries, fucking Ruler, fucking Viper. You just put one of these guys on the wrong draft like that. That's the problem with having a really good ADC playing against you. So it also makes it tricky, I think, to draft against Vitality. Like, obviously, you don't know their identity necessarily, but there's certain things you just can't give up at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you look at with Vitality where you're like, he doesn't really like Upset has played Draven before, but he's not really a Draven player.
He's not that type of player. I think he's, by the way, for me, you know, when we had Neon on that episode and Neon explained why he doesn't play it, that's way more Upset's way of thinking. It's like he agrees the champion's OP, but it's like you don't want to be on the game where you don't get the kills and you get ganked early. Like, that's just a shit game, innit? So I know a lot of the like most traditional ADCs don't like the champion, mate.
Yeah, he'd much rather play something where he feels like he's ahead. It's the same reason he always prioritizes Lucian really highly, because on Lucian, you're generally ahead of the pace of the game. You have first strike, so you have more gold than them. When you take the inspiration tree, that also means you get free boots, so you get magical footwear, which is also free gold. So you always are kind of ahead of the other AD carry, and then you just have like very defined spikes where you can pressure them. And he wants to play the game systematically. He doesn't want to like get into a 3v3 or like have the game be predicated on if your team can dive well. Like, is Kaiser going to play this bot dive well? Let's see. Oh, he didn't. I guess we lose the whole fucking thing. He doesn't want to be that guy. So there are certain things that Upset doesn't play, but he plays a lot of the stuff that other teams don't play well as well. So I think on the other side of things, he's one of the AD carries that can actually play Caitlyn in the lane.
For sure.
That's huge. Like, so if you have the Zeri, you have the Caitlyn, then you can also play, you know, whatever standard AD you need. If you need an upset Xayah, no problem. You want to go Xayah Rakan? Sure. Like, any day of the week. You want to play Aphelios? Okay, Thresh Aphelios. Like, we'll get him on that. I think that he plays enough that he has an advantage. But yeah, I mean, that's part of what makes the eventual, what everyone's hoping for, the G2 Vitality matchup so hype, is that they are different. There are different strengths to what these teams do. Like, Hansama is very much the guy who wants to shit on you in lane, and he's got like a better support, right? So if you have Mickey X, you're more confident in just diving, cashing in the Draven, and, you know, just carrying the game from there. It's more just his playstyle. Like, they want to play the Kalista, Draven, that type of stuff. And then, you know, on the other side of things, Upset wants to play all the strong meta ADs. He wants to play Zeri. He wants to play Xayah. He wants to play, you know, Caitlyn in good lanes, and yeah, Zeri when it's up, everything.
By the way, we never addressed this before, but let's do it now since he actually doesn't play in LEC anymore. How awkward in context has that episode last year with Neon become? Because if you go back, guys, I'm not joking. We not only both are like, it's fucking bullshit, Tommy. You should be on a way better team. But I think when we figured out all the teams, we're even like, it's Vitality. They're the one logically that should recruit him. Because I think when we figured it out, you know, at the time, like, you wouldn't take Upset off Fnatic. If you did like the math sort of like, it was just going to be probably like, bearing in mind, we thought G2 maybe wasn't available. Yeah, it was going to have to be one of these teams. So the joke is he got exactly what we wanted, but then it just went so bad. Like, no, that's the, I'm not even joking. I could never have conceived of how badly that went. I even kept thinking, dude, the last split, he was going to turn around at some point. I kept thinking, like, surely, you know, they sort of figure it out or they band-aid it or something. It just never fixes that. It's just really awkward, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's super awkward, especially if you just like go and you look at like his Twitter. Because I remember after like the first game they won it, he's like tweeted out, "This is gonna be the best year of my life," and I was like, "Oh, the best year!" Like 2 months later, he's like, "I underperformed, and I'm sorry for it. I'm going to take this time to work on my skills, hone them, and hopefully return to the LEC someday." Like, fuck, bro, it hurt. It hurts so much looking back at it.
I'm gonna have to look that up. That's so bad. Like this. Okay, what, guys? This is looking like the best year of my life.
Yeah.
Please, no, please. That's so rough. And also, the worst thing is, he's in a good example. A bit, it's worse than, I think what's happened to Neon is worse than what happened to the XL players, Dom. Because here's what's mad. Because XL collectively was so bad, it sort of means that we all do still think, surely Vethio will come back, you know, even like fucking, maybe even, let's be real, like even fucking Cersei will probably be half decent on another team eventually. But the joke is, I actually think the way that Neon was bad, and then the fact that Upset replaced him will look so much better, I think people are going to do that thing for real, where in their minds, Neon doesn't exist anymore for LEC. Like, I think, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get back in. It's sad because I don't think, surely he can't just be thrown away completely. Like, it's not even just that one split, dude. You could go back when he was in Schalke and SK. Like, he had good games. Like, he's not a bad player, but I just think it just looked so bad that people, unfortunately, like, that's going to be burned into their brain in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost nothing. Like, sometimes somebody will look bad, but it'll be bad because they're limited. They won't be just good at all aspects of something, but they'll have like some way to get past where you're like, all right, maybe it wasn't his meta or something. He looked bad on everything. Even the champions he was good on in previous splits, he still looked bad on. So like, even when they tried to band-aid, it's like, all right, fuck it. Like, you'll just play like Sivir. Like, yeah, you just play like a Sivir versus Zeri game. He looked bad on that. They gave him the Zeri. He looked bad on that. Oh, we could play pressure with Caitlyn. He looked bad on that. He just looked bad on everything, kind of. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't do him any favors that Kaiser inted, but there was just so many individual mistakes that's tough. So I feel like, I mean, it sucks to say, but he's going to have to go like the Crownie or like the Kabi route.
Yes.
One of those routes where it's like,
it's going to be hard work, mate, to get back. Yeah, for sure. You're going to have to be on a bad team and sort of look way better than everyone else.
It's crazy that 1 month, literally, I mean, that was 1 month, right? It's like fucking 5 weeks. Like, so 5 weeks undid like years of good work. That's insane.
Oh, it's wild, isn't it? Oh,
fuck, it was us. We ruined his career. We're like, he deserves a better team.
I know.
And then, like, he got a better team, and it's like, oh shit, maybe he should have just stayed on like Heretics or something. Like, if he was on Heretics instead of like Jack Spectra, people would not be flaming. They'd be like, yeah, bro, like Evie and Ruby, what could he do? You know, like, it was also just that type of thing.
You've talked about before, but I do actually I've made this point many times with coaches, but I do think there is a psychological thing. Like, it's a very different to be the big fish in a small pond or to be the small fish in a big pond. Like, there's such a big difference between being far and away the best player on like a bottom half LEC team, and he wasn't even that, obviously he had Vethio, but he was like the second best player, or being like trying to be part of a top team that's just trying to win the league. Like the clearly that difference isn't just you get better teammates. Like the expectations are different. What you can demand, how you even conceive of yourself in the game can be very different. So I do feel like he seems like he's suffered from that. I'll also throw this in, even though it'd be way too reductive to act like all the games that the Misfits lineup won with the ones with Yuumi. I will say Mercer did play Yuumi every time it was fucking up. So I will just throw this out there. To be fair, since they were always winning in team fights, it was a Yuumi on top of Neon, on top of Vethion. That's essentially like you've just boosted the stats of the fucking carry anyway. So I will say, when you don't have that, you're going to look worse. Like that's like the carry on steroids at that point in time. Late game Yuumi on like a fucking Akali or Sivir or something. You're going to shit on everyone, of course. You know,
it just sucks also where he had the bad split, because people are mentioning like, oh, but Hans got a chance. The thing is, all Europeans think that NA is so shit that they don't watch it.
No one blames anyone if you do bad there, mate. No one does.
They don't watch it and they don't even care. They're like, yeah, it's because the fucking American food and the way the Americans fucking speak with their disgusting American accent, and it's because of the fucking he was afraid of the gun crime. They just find a bunch of reasons as to why that just doesn't matter. You know,
people
like
don't know. In the off season,
he'll be at LEC.
I heard nobody was out on Hans Sama in the off season, mate. All the same people wanted him, and just as much. There was. It's crazy because, like you said, it's almost like it didn't happen. You would almost think he was just on the bench for a year. It was crazy. Yeah, even though they were right. Like, look, fair play. Turned out they were right. He actually is really good again.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, I just want to know like what happened. I mean, from what I've heard from everyone, they just say that he's like an extremely sensitive person, and if the team environment is not good, he is going to like severely underperform. G2 looks like it has a great team environment. When you win, you have a pretty good team environment, generally speaking. You know. So.
No, but I'll also say as well, they do seem like they've got that balance, like very well done. Like, it's not like they've just got jokers. Like, for example, if people don't know, Dylan Falco's not much of a joker, but he doesn't have to be. He's just sort of like the coach who seems to know how to work with the players. And then they've got Caps, seems to be like the sort of culture leader of the team. Then Broken Blades kind of like adds in some of the fun element and relieves some of the... It actually seems like they've got a nice little mix of players there, mate. Like, it's not like they're all one way, even they're not like the old G2, like where they're all banter as well. No, they actually got like a nice little balance. And as you say, when you're winning and you're the best team, there should just be less problems, shouldn't there? Like, everything's working.
Yeah,
what reason do you have to be mad at anyone?
I don't think there's anyone who's like super confrontational on their team, which could be like a bad thing if there's big problems and they're not getting resolved. But when you look at like the players, they seem like they would approach problems with a more like mild manner. Like, I don't think that Caps is going to be like, what the fuck are you doing here? What are you doing here, bro? You should have came mid. Like, Caps is going to be like, don't you think we should be like mid here? Like, smiling and shit, you know? BB's also somebody who's like a very nice person. Mickey is not an abrasive person. I just think that these players suit Hans very well. Like, they're not going to be people where he just feels like uncomfortable around them.
Here's some I saved for you, right? Because I was waiting for the right moment. This is just sort of one of my flights of fancy, Dom, where I just take a premise that no one's thought about and I'll just use it for comedic purposes. So here's the thing, right? What people are going to forget is this detail, is obviously the coach of Fnatic now is Freeze's twin brother, who's a guy who actually was more tangentially around League and mainly as a coach.
I thought it was just Freeze.
And then obviously the joke is they're identical, right? They're literally identical twins. Now, I've told a story in the past about the time that I met them, and that actually caused some hilarity in itself, but that's a separate story. What I'm going to say is this. Here's what people are forgetting. Does anyone remember way back in like 2016 or something like that, when there was that Twitter flame where Reckless flamed Freeze and then even Forgiven jumped in? And it was that whole thing of where like Forgiven and Freeze were calling like Sven and Reckless, you know, like the Nordic Wonder Boys. Do you remember this flame war? And then what happened was Reckless like won the battle by just doing like, you know, he did like his Leaguepedia trophies or something, you know, like just showed he had like, you know, all these and so look, I'll say, by the way, as banter, that's pretty funny. It's just not obviously a point that makes you actually better at the game because like, you know, different teams. But it was good banter. I'll give Reckless, that's actually pretty good bants. All I'll say is this. If you are Freeze, and sadly I know Freeze, he's actually a cool guy. He doesn't really hold any massive grudges. He just thought like I did that Reckless was overrated. But if you actually did hold grudges, all I'm going to say is this, Freeze. Technically, if you come back to Europe, mate, you can just walk in that house anytime if you have the right clothes on. No one will ask anything. You can go anywhere you want in the house. You can do it. You can just take a shit on Reckless's bed and just walk out. Like, they'll think it was your brother. Like, you'll get away with it. So all I'm saying is, if you want to do some movie shenanigans as an identical twin, now's your chance. Now's your chance to get back on him. That's all I'm saying. So I'm just putting that out there. That's on the table. So if you're Reckless, just watch your back. Just be paranoid. Essentially, Reckless, every time you see your coach, it should be like those scenes in Inception where he has to use that totem to check if it's like reality or not. You should just be like sort of asking him like, "Hello, night share," or just even try and just every now and then, if you're Reckless, just if you're just in the room, just go like, "Yeah, so anyway, what do you think, Freeze?" And then when he goes, "Well, I think, what do you mean? I mean, I'm Nightshare. No, Freeze? What? That's my brother. He just looks like me. I will just keep doing that all the time. I do like reality checks at all points, basically. So essentially, all I'm saying is you can either shit on his bed or just gaslight him into a false reality that destroys his mind. You know, just thought I'd put that out there for fun. So you don't get these segments on the LEC. That's the thing. We keep it fresh here. We always have a different angle to take on what we're doing here.
I mean, to be fair, I watch it. I watch LEC muted most of the time. So I'm not 100% sure if they talk about this or not, but I would guess that they're not talking about Freeze breaking into Fnatic's house and then like either gaslighting one of their players or taking a shit on his bed. But
and to be fair, if you're reckless, wouldn't even be that bad. I mean, that Rocks guy used to shit the bed every get the joke anyway. Come on. There's always a segue. There's always a segue. Understand that. Right. So, let's talk about the other group now. Like I set up on the last one, I actually think this is an example of where if you have a similar sort of like lens that we use, which is essentially me and Dom do the thing of like, this is why we count veterancy as meaning something. Just the experience of being in that situation just means you're more prepared. You understand how to roll with the punches. You know what happens if you lose a K game. You know how to draft adapt. If you're only a sort of a BO1 player, you've never been on a team that was expected to win, it's so unfortunately it is sort of a crapshoot. We can't really know how you'll play. We can't know how you'll react to a game one loss. We can't know how you'll react to drafting your best comp, but then just losing miserably and going like, shit, that was plan A, B, and C. So when you come to the group, dude, you know I said how Group A is almost designed to allow a team like Astralis to maybe even get out. Group B looks like it's just set up to be like, right, BDS, if you are at all fraudulent, this group is here to prove it, because these are all the teams that in theory people will expect to get you in the BO3s. Like, what... On the last episode, we talked about, like, you always say with BDS, your biggest concern is, like, they always do have that moment in the game where essentially, like, it's not that they always throw it, but they're just, like, they do their hardest to give the other team a chance to win the game, you know what I mean? Like, they don't always pure throw. Sometimes they even win these games, but it's like, this is what Mad Lions used to do last split. They always give you that one chance back. Even if they do a godlike play on the map, they'll always go, like, it's almost like a sporting chance, like, go on, you have one chance. There you go, you get a free shot, but that's it, right? If they do that in this group, mate, they're not going to get out, are they? You know what I mean? Like, I think this is exactly the group to punish them.
Yeah, it's tough to watch them because it's like if a boxer, like you looked at a boxer and they always had a habit of like holding their hands too low at a point in the fight. It's like, oh, you can just knock them out right here. If you have any, like, if you notice this, you just knock them out. But if not, I guess they can still win the fight.
Yes.
You see just this vulnerability that's so massive within BDS that it's hard to see a team not exploiting it over a series. And especially when you combo that in with the fact that they actually did really well in the group stage or the fucking season stage last season. I fucking hate this shit, man. In winter season, they did well, just like in spring season, but in the winter groups, they ended up faltering. I could see them also faltering here because there's a similarity in how the team did in best of ones versus best of threes. I'm just gonna end my point there because I just can't handle.
Dude, it sounds like we're in like 1984 or something like. And a season, of course, is part of a split, isn't it? Yes, big brother. And a split is part of a season. Yes, that makes all perfect sense. Totally correct. Season, sir, please. There's just some guy being taught like, it's round robin and forever. Like, break this man. Break him. This resistor to the state. It's meant
best of ones and best of threes.
Yeah, that's like I said before, guys, we've nailed it. Just call it best of ones, best of threes, best of five. There you go. Problem solved. Those are the three phases. We got it sorted. No, sure. On this particular topic, like, the biggest problem I have is this. I'll also say this. I'm someone who has a really hard time believing that players who got a bit better are fundamentally going to stay better. So unfortunately, Dom, the other problem I have is this. If I take the nameplates off and I just look at BDS as a whole and I look at how they allow like fucking crown shot to play and I look at some of Adam's solo kills, I could get really hyped and be like, hey, maybe this team can like be a challenger for G2. Maybe they can be like top 3 this split, Dom. The problem is this. When I put the nameplates back on, people can think this is haterism. I just cannot believe that Nook and Chio are going to like the finals of LEC. I can't believe that they're beating like, yeah, I'll just sit right up. I can't even believe they're going to beat like Koi, for example. These players, I'm sorry, dude, the whole history of this region is jungle mid. And so, unfortunately, that is, in theory, some of the weaker players on this team. And so, even though they are better than they were in the past, I just don't believe they're top players. I don't, mate. Which sounds like haterism, because, like, Shio especially, he has the odd game where he looks pretty good. I don't personally really buy Nuke at all, mate. Like, to me, he's just another one of those people where it's like, your job is to just pilot a normal Azir. And then you win the game and everyone's like, It's like, what did he do? You know what I mean? Like, guys, there's a reason why I don't hype just every mage player. I hype the ones who are like gods in CSing or the super sick at teamfight. Is this guy really that good as a mid lane? He's just sort of all right, isn't he? Like, if he was on Astralis, would they be winning? I don't know about that. You know what I mean? So even though it's haterism, I just sort of don't believe in those two players long term. You know, I'll give them props when they win games now. I have to, but I just don't believe in them, Dom. I can't imagine a world where it's like, and now entering the LEC finals, Nook and Shio, your jungle mid. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not happening, is it? You know.
Oh, it sounds so tough. It sounds so tough. And then especially, like, even if they somehow made it to the finals, they still wouldn't go to MSI because they placed technically 7th last split. So they have to, like,
they have to win outright.
Pretty much.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
It's so fucked up, actually.
So it's even worse than just a Mad Lions side. It now means you can be second. Dude, that would be crazy because they would have been first in the BO1s. Dude, by this logic, that means they could literally be first in the BO1s. They could win the BO3s, come first as well. But if you just come second in the playoffs, you don't go to MSI. That feels off. Someone's off about that, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it feels terrible. Which is why, like, I think that there's a good point that somebody made to me within the LEC. I don't know if they made this point publicly, so I'm just going to leave the name off. But one thing they said was, the biggest advantage that the first seed should get is they should get to decide what group they go into. Like, the group should be picked, and then the first seed gets to decide what group they go into, rather than just choosing the opponent. Because you look at this and it's like, what the fuck advantage did BDS get? They got to play against SK. It's not like that qualifies you, right? If you beat SK, then you still have to beat G2. If you lose G2, then you have to beat Koi.
Yes.
So you still have to play the
it would, as you're saying, it would have been way better if BDS could have picked to be in Group A, right?
Yeah, for sure. That would be a much bigger advantage. Yes. I mean, I think there's just something off about like how the top seeds are rewarded, because in other formats, for example, like in LCK, you get to skip around. In LPL, since it's 10 teams, you get to skip a bunch of rounds.
You're like 3 rounds. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you essentially skip to the same point in the tournament, because like the way you have to see it is like there's only 6 teams in LCK playoffs. So it's like you win one where it's single elimination, and then you get into like the best of 5s where it's double elimination. You get to the double elimination stage automatically, the same way that like T1 and Gen G got to the best of 5 or the double elimination stage automatically. I just feel like there's something off about the fact that like BDS, they won 3 more games than Koi. And they won, was it 3 more games than Koi, or was it more?
I think so it should be 3, I think.
Yeah, 3 more games than Koi. And their reward for winning 3 more games than Koi is that they get to still play a best of 3 against Koi, like later on, most likely. It just doesn't seem, it just doesn't seem right, because there's like, just a single best round robin. So I don't really like the advantage that they got, considering how well they played. And then I'm with you where you just don't believe in these. There's a bunch of flaws within BDS. Not only do they have like a gameplay catastrophe every single time, they're limited by champion pools. You saw that be an issue in the best of 3s last time, when you knew that Adam was going to pick Olaf. What ended up happening, you had the Kled in the final game, and Astralis, who was considered significantly worse than them. Like, BDS and Astralis were in completely different tiers, if you remember back to like the winter season, because the winter split. Because in the season portion of it, BDS was 5-4, but they looked really good in their games, where Astralis was supposed to be out, and they just had that like miracle run where Fnatic ended up choking and EXO was just dog shit, and Astralis barely made it after starting like 0-5. No one really believed in them. BDS went to have a competitive series against G2, and then they just ended up losing to Astralis in the losers. So it felt very weird for BDS, because the trajectory was like, oh, they look pretty good in like the best of 1s. Now when they go to the best of 3s, are they legit? They look pretty legit. They're able to take a game off G2. That's pretty fucking good. And they just lose 2 games to Astralis, and one of them is because Adam just completely runs it down on Olaf. He tilted so hard with his item build and just the way he played out the game. It was crazy. You just felt like, oh, I guess we didn't really get to see BDS. I can see the same thing happening, unfortunately, where maybe they look really good. Maybe they even beat SK. It's like, okay, nice, they beat SK. They skip 1 best of 3, then they play Koi, and then Koi just plays 2 solid Koi games. I mean, when you look at Koi plays BDS, or when you see Koi play against BDS, you can see how if Koi plays a little bit better, they don't int just as hard, they could end up winning.
Yes, I agree.
They can catch the throws for sure. And Koi looks like a harder team to beat in a best of series. They're better at limiting how hard they int. So it's definitely hard for BDS. I don't know if I would just take them as like favorites to get out of this group, even though I do think it will be difficult. Like, Koi has looked so bad, it's very hard to like make the judgment there.
No, for sure, Koi's the one where like I feel like no one really knows where the actual like floor's supposed to be on that team. It seems like it's not that low, but they do have some games that look a bit sus. Then again, they also do that thing where it's like they win the unconvincing games, but they do it sort of almost routinely enough that you can't totally lose all faith in them, if you know what I mean. Like I said, it sounds weird because sometimes they're the ones that catch the throw now, even though they used to be the throwers themselves if you go back enough years. It's weird how that works. They've sort of become the vets who just catch the throw if you give them the opening. By the way, on the BDS side, here's the main thing that's the upside for BDS, in my opinion. Mate, if they do get out of this group, and especially if they do make any impact on this playoffs, the one person who is going to get insane credit is Crownshot. Because that's the thing. We're not, unfortunately, unless they smurf, going to say, like I said, like Nook and Shio, like, oh, these are really like among the best players in Europe. But if Crownie can actually take this team to like third or fourth or something, mate, he's fucking smurfed this whole year so far. What a fucking amazing turnaround. Because there's another person where, it's like you say, his rep before was he was in the same bucket as the Neons of the world. People just thought of him as like, yeah, it's like sort of like a fairly good like journeyman ADC. Like, you know, on a bad team, he'll be like the better player. But essentially like what Kobe is now, he'll be good on like a bad team, but you wouldn't want him on a top team. The joke now is like, I already saw enough last split, but I've definitely seen enough now. I do want Crownshot on a top team. And quite frankly, unlike Neon, who has a much shorter career, I'm actually not that worried, mate, that I think Crownie would actually be good. Like, if you put Crownie on Fnatic or something, I think he'd just be really good. I think just the team would just level up.
Yeah, I think he's really solid, and he's somebody who's kind of in the same like upset bin of 80 carries that know what they want. You know, like that's the thing. You know, it's like an older woman. Like as they get older, they start learning what they want. It's the same thing. Crownie just knows what he wants. He knows what he needs.
Crownie the Cougar. Okay. Yeah, Crownie coming in, all leopard skin print.
Yeah.
Like, well, boys,
this is what I like.
Where are all the big strong boys in here? Where are the sailors at? Get me a little Zeri pick. All right, fucking hell.
Yeah, no, that's Crownie. That's Crownie. But actually, like, he's really good at being able to get his team to play around him, and it gives BDS.
Yeah, he has them all wrapped around his finger. All those lads, exactly.
I knew you would go somewhere with that, so I just needed to throw the one out there, and then I just knew you would just you just go hard from there. But he'll give the team some direction. It's similar to how like Leader, like even though he hasn't played a lot of LEC, he's a confident person who's played enough, and he's been a professional for a long enough period of time where he understands how he wants to play his lane, and he gives the team direction. Where I feel like Sheo's also benefiting from the fact that, you know, he has somewhere to go. If things are going bad or he feels a little bit lost, Adam knows what he wants and Crownie knows what he wants. Like, I feel like Nuck is the type of player who doesn't really know what he wants. He's just like, yeah, just let me just do my thing. You know, like he doesn't really interact with his teammates too much. And even like the way he plays the game, he's not somebody who's roaming a lot. When he played like the Gragas game, I think that was his worst game of the split. He doesn't seem like somebody who's much of an enabler, but he'll do a relatively decent enough job in team fights. It just feels like BDS is a team that you should be able to prep drafts first. You should be able to prep drafts. You should be able to get some type of draft advantage because what BDS does is so telegraphed. And then on top of that, when you pair that with like the massive throw, there should just be angles for you to win if you just don't play terribly. Because a lot of the games, like BDS throws, man, like the 2 games they lost were throws. The thing is, are you going to be able to weather the storm? Are you going to get to the point where the throws will actually matter, or are they going to throw and then just respawn and win the game anyway?
On the other angle as well, that ends up like almost counterintuitively working for BDS is it's almost like a fucked up version, Dom, of like Monty's theory as to how T1's able to like isolate Zeus for all those 1v1s because everyone just plays bot side and they all just die bot lane all day long with even the mid laner. Like they almost have a fucked up version of that in BDS because the genius of why this pairing of Adam and Crownie almost makes sense is because since you know Crownshot is the main carry and win condition of BDS and you're going to be ganking think about it either way, it works for BDS. If you just gank bot lane all day long, Adam doesn't matter, he doesn't know waves, he just gets to 1v1 against people he's probably sometimes going to be stronger than. Meanwhile, if you do the opposite, Dom, let's say a team decides, no, we're going to push this Adam guy down early, then Crownshot's just farming for free in bot lane, and you just got a 2v2 with no jungle interaction. Like, either way, in a counterintuitive sense, sort of works out. Like, they almost cover each other's weakness in that sense, you know. It's actually a pretty nice setup.
Yeah, no, it's decent setup for sure. It makes a lot of sense the way that their team can play. I just think that, like, in general, you do want to accept that, like, if you just ban out a couple Adam champions and you leave him 1v1, he's not going to completely carry the entire game. So, like, ban out Olaf Darius, you know, pick something that is not going to get completely exploited by a bruiser pick. Don't pick, like, the Jax blind into Adam. I feel like that's what people are doing. They're picking, like, Jax blind. Let him play his Scion again. let Adam do another one of those Scion performances and play bot side, because late game, I don't really trust Nuck to be able to carry the entire game. And, you know, if Crownie is ever really behind, it looks tough for them. I mean, the only game that I can remember them winning where Crownie was super behind was that one versus Astralis, but that felt like more of a very uncomfortable Astralis comp where like leader was on the Annie and everything. And I don't know if I'm gonna say that that's like enough of a win, especially with the fact that Astralis was still getting their shit together. They're also a team that is prone to making like suboptimal mid-game decisions and things like that. I don't know if that's enough for me to just be like, oh yeah, they're fine if Crownie's behind. It feels like Crownie needs to be ahead to carry some of these fights.
Also, I actually feel like this is another team where I'm surprised. I guess it's because they win games. Maybe it doesn't bother you as much. I'm surprised you don't get more triggered about how people draft versus Adam, dude. Because the other thing I think is really counterintuitive to me is this. I'm actually on the train you're on, which is you ban out just his fucking 2-trick champions that he just so smurfs on. And if they're vaguely in the meta, you ban him out because he's just too good on them, especially because it's not even just how he plays them out. Like, he's not some master of the game, but in lane especially, he just knows all the little tricks of when he can get a kill and when you don't think he can, or when the matchup, like you say, it's not actually as losing as you think. But the problem is this: if I was teams, I would only be banning that shit against him. I would always leave up like strong power picks that he just does not play. Guys, there are picks that are really strong for top lane that you can just float against him. He's not going to pick them, and if he is, I think quite frankly, it'll tank his game. I actually think that essentially what Adam's getting away with is, because he's so good on these really weird pocket picks, people are sort of like afraid of him in the draft. That's all you have to ban, in my opinion. Once you get him off those onto normal picks, he's just a normal player, and he's just not a top player, in my opinion. It's no hate, but
yeah,
to me, I'm amazed people aren't cynical against him, essentially.
Yeah, I think that they should be more cynical for sure. I mean, to Adam's credit, the thing that he's gotten better at is that he's like been able to find enough champions that are like workarounds to that problem. So, for example, Set operates very similarly to how Darius operates in the lane, and Olaf, where he will have these kill angles. He can pressure you if you pick matchups like that. And then the fact that he's able to pick up Malphite in this most recent week, I think was really big, because he's able to just put draft pressure on the enemy team. And if the enemy team drafts majority AD, then Malphite obviously becomes really strong. I do think that BDS looks weaker, though, when he's on those things, though. Like, I mean, just undeniably, if you look at the game versus Vitality, if Perks played at all a human Gragas, like if he was just decent at Gragas and not horrible at Gragas, then they'd probably still just lose that game. Like, BDS just lose that game.
They should have, yes.
It's not that they're not winning at any point in the game, but BDS always throws, and versus a good team, that throw is going to put you in a position where you should lose. So they did that Baron where they, like, didn't know if they wanted to turn or not. Adam did that really weird, like, solo ulti. And then Vitality just gets massively ahead. You know, one bad play around the inhibitor from Perks, and suddenly the game is over. And then Perks gets caught and the game is over. So I just feel like these are the times where, even though BDS gets credit for the win, I don't know if you're gonna like be able to win multiple games when you're playing a team of that caliber in a best of 3.
I feel like even though the last split, SK was one of the most exciting teams with seemingly one of the highest ceilings, and they were shocking everyone. Am I right in getting the sense that, are you on a similar train to me on the SK one, which is, I just feel like, unfortunately, they're not strong enough at any one thing that I can see them actually winning. Like, I'll just be straight up, I could see a world where they're the last place team in this group.
Yeah, definitely. Plausible. I mean, I think they're expected to be the last place team in the group, and you know, the main thing is that I think their bot lane looks a lot worse than they did in spring. They were solo killing like every single game in spring. Relevant was doing his weak side thing. Their bot lane was perma smashing, but now the bot lane is like just a regular bot lane. You know, they came back down to earth. They make mistakes in lane. They sometimes get behind, and the rest of the team is just not good enough to operate with a bot lane that's not playing well. I mean, when you look at some of the series, the reason why SK versus Mad Lions was so close is because Exekick was a much better AD carry than Carzzy in that series. Like, that's what actually happened in that series. I mean, game 5, like, Carzzy is sending it, but it ends up working anyway because the other players were like doing well enough. It just doesn't feel like SK still have that same like Exekick as they did in winter. It just feels like there's something missing. There's just like, it's like they're playing freer in a way. If you look at SK's bot lane, it's like they're trying to play like to get more of an advantage as compared to before, where they were extremely stable in their approach. And as the game would go on, they would just try to make sure that they're doing the right thing at all points, and they wouldn't get super far behind. So when they'd get into team fights, like even if they're down gold elsewhere on the map, they could still execute the identity of their team comp. But now it feels like there's not much to play around, because Irrelevant is not a carry top player, even though he keeps on trying to play Jax, and he's supposed to be really good Jax in scrims. The fact of the matter is that he doesn't look super good on Jax when he plays it on stage, and the team operates worse when he's not able to like be a prominent team fighter on the Jax. So it is what it is. I just think that like SK, if they're going to do anything, Exekick has to just become a top tier AD again. He has to play like he was playing before.
By the way, that's even a point we can maybe talk, because it's more of an abstract point I will ask you something about, which is I also feel like that's an area of the game that gets really misunderstood. If people don't know, the concept of people on shores using the terminology weak side wasn't around for years and years in League of Legends. Like, obviously the concept was sort of understood, but that came around, I would say, essentially after like the Samsung era where people split the map, etc. That started to come around, I would say, maybe like 2015, 2016, 2017 sort of eras when people started spamming that. The reason why, to me, that terminology was so key to introduce to League Dom is because people before just went based on the champion you picked. Whereas like what you're talking about here, I agree. Even if Irrelevant is supposed to be some good Jax player, even if he picks it, they're not going to play it like you would if Photon was on Jax and you play through him and play around. Like, essentially, he's just going to be playing a carry champion, but on the other side, he'll still be weak side. He'll just be at the top of the map, 1v1, potentially, if there's no jungle interaction. Like, I think that's part that people in the modern day lose track of, because if people don't know, there are definitely, like, LPL does this all the time. They'll be the player on top side is definitely playing the weak side of the map, but he'll be playing like a carry champ. It's just he's already playing it to get solo kills or up and see. He's not, they're not going to ever, like, pilot him like a Fiora on the whole map and win the whole game off it. Like, I do think there's a distinction there, because a lot, like in the current meta, there's lots of times you don't have to pick the fucking tank, but there's a big difference between actually being a fucking strong side top laner. So no one should ever get that status just because you put the odd fucking pick in. Like, you get that status if you actually can be played through with your team and win games off it, like, reliably, for me.
Yeah.
And there's not many teams like that in LEC, mate. There's very, very few.
100%. And Jax is also a champion. You have to be willing to like flip trades. You have to be willing to like trade at times, like where you're going to potentially kill. And if you don't kill, your wave's not going to be in a great state. So you have to like kill or be killed sometimes in the matchup. And I feel like Irrelevant isn't like comfortable picking those timings on when he's going to like flip. It seems like he's better at making the best decision possible with the information available. So if he knows that this guy is roaming top or the jungler is going to dive him on a certain wave, he knows whether I should I suicide to make sure that I like keep this wave off my turret so I don't get too far in behind in CS. Should I back off completely? Should I teleport back to the turret? All those types of decisions in mid game, the way he plays. And he's able to just always like have his TP up at the right spot, avoid when they try to kill him on side lane. All these types of things are what he does really well. And that doesn't really apply to like Jax. A lot of Jax, like when you look at Photon's Jax, for example, the game that he played on it, he's just fucking going in perma.
Yeah.
He's just running at the other guy and trying to
It's a true LPL top laner. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like he played to fucking win, and it's like, yeah, if you kill me, it doesn't matter. I'm still Jax. I'm gonna respawn. I'm gonna run at you again. Like he played super cocky, and I just don't think Irrelevant wants to play like that on stage. He's a mega veteran in a fucking rookie's body.
Obviously, that could be a really fucked up search on Pornhub.
Okay.
Veteran, rookie's body, you figure it out. You figure it out. Listen, I know he hates Koreans, but bloody hell, that's taking it a bit far, isn't it?
Jesus.
Anyway. Right, what about this then? The problem I feel like when you're talking about G2 is this. Everyone seems as a consensus to agree they're the best. But the flaw, I think, is this, Dom. They're not like without any fucking weaknesses. People are acting like they're like the problem with all G2 lineups that have caps, and let's put Mickey X as well, or the Yankos in the past. People will try and always connect them to the great G2s and act like they're sort of back to that. Like they're not that good, guys. They are really good. Like the key thing for me with G2, I would say their biggest strength is this. One, Caps almost never plays bad. That's fucking enormous right there. But then from that, I think it's a direct consequence. When they do get the big lead in the game, they're easily the best team at closing the game. Like, this is not the team you want to try and come back against. Like, there's a reason why, like, even if they'd have played last split, that SK team was never going to be behind in gold and then beat G2. Like, that just wasn't even on the cards. They needed to be playing a Mad Lions or somebody who might throw a game of Koi, you might, like, be weak at one point. Like, to me, when G2 plays what they want to, they're really strong. But I still think some of their players, like, it's harder in LEC, but they can still get showed up. They won't always be 3 winning lanes, etc.
Yeah, G2, they took a different approach to split. And I wonder what that is, what that stems from. I mean, it could just be that they're trying to develop more styles. They feel like they're really good at playing bot lane, win con, early dive bot lane, like, really just snowballing the game extremely hard just from, bot lane counter picks, super dominant bot lane champions, plus diving it. Maybe they think that they're already so good at that they want to explore different styles. But I just feel like a lot of their games, like even from draft, are a lot less conducive to like what the team's strengths are than they previously were. So for example, they really like playing Vi now, and I don't think that Yike is a bad Vi, but it feels like G2 doesn't have the patience as a team to play with a Vi, where it's like, okay, we play a stable early game, we make sure that Vi can get level 6. At level 6, Vi gets a kill. Every time Vi is able to ult and get a kill, we translate that into an objective, and then we do the same thing again when Vi has ult back up. It seems like they just want to fight more than that. So I feel like G2's looked weaker because they're not really playing as much into what their strengths were as compared to in winter. And I'm not really sure why that is. Also, I mean, apparently they're losing more scrims, which they're saying is great. You hear people
tried to make it sound good because obviously before they
we're learning,
smurfed on everyone,
lose, improve, and stuff like that. But at some point, I'm like, I wonder if you keep on playing this way for too long, will you lose a bit of like what you did well originally? Because that always happens with teams where you'll try to play a new comp. You'll be like, okay, like we already have mastered all this stuff, so now let's move on. And then you move on, you try to pick up different things. Like, for example, in my era, a bunch of Koreans were playing the submarine Eve comp where you'd have like Eve flanking with like a Shen, right? Like that was the Shen ult on the invisible Eve. That was something that we tried to do for a week. And then we went back, we're like, fuck it, bro. We'll go back to like Phoenix Azir and stuff like that. We're like, wait, we're not pressuring on the right waves anymore. We don't really remember like how to play with an Azir compared to like when you're full diving with Shen to Eve, you're just looking for angles and full diving. Things like this always happen. So obviously I don't think that they're going to get Draven again. But the thing that made G2 so strong is they had the replacement Dravens. It's like, oh, we don't have Draven, but we have the insane flexes. So we have like the Jarvan support with Samira, or we have the Kalista lane, and we're just going to do the same thing again. Or if like we have Mickey X Heimer, we're going to play the same way no matter what Hans is playing. I don't know if they still are going to be able to win games as easily playing that style if they don't start, bringing it back in this best of 3 stage. And then also, I don't even think they need to change the way they play the game. Like, I feel like this team, when you watch them play, their top laner should just be weak side. At this point, with the way BB's been playing, he can play carry champions. Like, he can play Kled if it's a good Kled game.
He's a good example of what I was talking about before. Give him whatever pick he wants. He's just going to be weak side, right?
Yeah, he's just not going to get many other resources, and the team's going to be winning bot lane. I mean, last split, most of the games he played were on Jax, and like he just wasn't amazing on Jax. He wasn't like a next level fucking crazy ass bin Jax or something like that. But he was a good enough Jax. Like, he would kind of lose late, and then he would show up and he team fought pretty well. That's what they need from him, and I think that they should really just keep their style strong, because I don't like the new thing that they've been doing. I don't want to see them being like a Talia Vi team. I just don't think that that's the way that this team will succeed internationally. They need to just be the best at what they were doing before.
I actually agree, but on a different take. Like, basically, my speculation would be this, Dom. I haven't got any inside info. I haven't asked anyone about this, and I'm not like secretly informed myself with something they told me. This is pure speculation. I get the vibe that because they actually won last split too easily, in air quotes, and especially that story about how they were just beating everyone in scrims. People still forget. They still don't get the punchline of what that image on the whiteboard was. The image wasn't the records in scrims. The joke in scrims is they're beating everyone so much that the whiteboard was every team in the league dodging scrims against G2, because it essentially implied it's just hopeless to play G2 in scrims, and so everyone else sort of low-key gave up in the league. And even bad teams like Astralis were avoiding them, guys. Like, even teams that in theory should never be saying no to a practice magically were cancelling, and that's why they made that whiteboard, to just show like essentially everyone dodges us, we're too good, right? I get the vibe, because Dylan Falco is a veteran coach and he was a part of some of these deep international runs previously that some of the Western teams have had. I get the vibe that they intentionally did try to use this split, like we're talking about, to try different styles, try different picks, like not be one-dimensional. Like, since you've beaten everyone else in the league anyway, maybe you even think it makes scrims better. But I think there's two parts to this. One, I definitely agree with you on that point. It's actually the most misunderstood thing by casual fans. A lot of fans do this thing with players and teams where they think that you're at a static level that you've reached, and that you just stay there unless you do something wrong. It's like, you have to think of it like training. You get to that level, but you have to maintain it day by day by day. You have to keep working on the same thing. I always use this example. If that was how it worked, like it was like fucking Dungeons and Dragons, and you have so many points in a skill and it stays there, then Steph Curry would shoot the least 3-pointers because he's the best, right? I guarantee he shoots the most 3-pointers in practice. He puts all his effort into that. That's why he's just unbeatably good at that one skill set. So basically, this always used to happen in my game of CSGO, but there's an analog in League, which is, in League, when fans always say that line on Reddit, like, this is a disgrace. This guy is a professional mid laner and he can't even play. Pick whatever you want, Malphite. It's like, no, you got the sentence wrong, bro. He just can't play against the other best players in his region, like the other 9 best players at his position, at a level where he's top 9. He might even be the 10th best on it. But the point is, like, he's not playing just to be able to play it. He has to be really good on it. And I agree with you. The downside and why people don't have super wide champion pools, why in Counter-Strike people don't have all the maps to play, is because you have to put in the hours just to maintain what you're good at. Because as you're saying, notice how subtly Dom pointed it out. It's not that you don't understand what you're doing, but you're going to lose all the intuitive feel for the game. You're going to lose the feeling of the timing of when you do the bot dive. You're going to lose the feeling of like, oh, fuck, the 1v1 does play out a bit different. You're not consciously doing that. You've trained yourself to play the game. And unfortunately, you haven't been training yourself if you go too far the other way onto some other shit. So I don't blame them, because on one level, I do like the idea of trying to be well-rounded and try and experiment, but I think maybe they just pushed it a bit too far in that. I'm with you. If push comes to shove, there is a very clear way this team can play League of Legends, and if they do it, they will just win this LEC split. They just will. I'm with you.
Yeah, and there's another dimension to that, which isn't just that they played bot side and they were playing these carry picks. It's the way that they set up the draft to make it impossible to know where these champs were going. So, I mean, old G2, if you think about 2019 G2, one of their biggest strengths was flex picks. The fact that they had perks who could play all the mid lane champions bot lane. And you also had Caps who could play any 80 carries mid lane. So he could play like a Tristana or something if they picked it and it needed to go there. So having that dynamic, I thought, was something that this G2 actually was bringing. They were able to play, like, for example, the Jarvan support game in finals. How insane was that? Where they have Jarvan support Samira, they just win the whole game off it. They did it with Kled, right? Like, Kled was going mid and top in finals. Gragas is another pick where I feel like they could play it in multiple different positions. So there's so much agency in those picks. I feel like that is something that they do well, is they're all super proficient mechanically on most champions. Like, the only person that you'd have a question for that on would be BB, but BB's biggest strength is actually his ability to play a wide range of champions. It's his finesse that sometimes is a little bit off, but in terms of his like proficiency and his ability to pick up champions, he loves playing a lot of champions. Just the way that he plays the game. When you watch a Broken Blade stream in solo queue, unless he's really training something specifically, he's going to just play like one game of Riven. Oh, this is a really good Olaf spot. Oh, he's going to play like another game of like a Cassio top or something. He's going to want to play a lot of different champions. And I felt like that's something that they've kind of lost in their draft. Like their draft, I mean, when you do things like first pick Vi as opposed to first pick Jarvan or Gragas, is you eliminate flex picks. Because when you pick Vi or you pick Wukong, there's almost only one place where it can go. Sure, you could technically put like a Vi mid or something, but there's going to be so many champions that they're going to pick that they're not going to even be thinking about the possibility of a Vi mid or something that will just counter the Vi mid or just completely make it suboptimal to play. So this is the biggest issue for me with what they're doing now, is their drafts are super telegraphed, where that was a big advantage that they had, and then their playstyle is too slow for how they want to play.
Because actually, if we talk specifically about G2 playing against Koi, the other thing as well, when I look at that matchup, Dom, is there's also a world where that's why it won't even matter how Broken Blade's doing. Like, I could see a world where in this game, both top laners have a carry pick in the top lane, but it's just a stupid island 1v1 and the rest of the game is just trying to get the bot ahead still. So, like, I think Koi's not a good matchup in the G2. It's probably one of their worst matchups in the league, right?
Koi into G2. Well, I thought that Koi was actually a better matchup into G2, because Koi kind of... when Koi is playing well, I mean, obviously there's two different Kois. There's the Koi that's playing well and the Koi that's playing like how they were recently. When they were playing in playoffs last split, it felt like they were the team that wasn't going to give you too much of an edge. So they would play the game slow, and it was kind of uncomfortable for G2 to just not have somebody like, they just want to kill you over and over again. They don't want to have you be able to like sit there and scale. So I think that there's a Koi that looks really good into G2. That's probably
no. If you mean the upper bracket one, they were good. But the problem is the one at the moment, I think, would have a lot of problems.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely could have a lot of problems. I think Shigenda matches up okay into BB, if you think about how Shigenda plays lanes, because I think BB's weakest area is laning. And in terms of like, if you want to say that Adam is the best at like fighting in lanes, but he has the worst understanding of waves, I would say Shigenda has one of the best understandings of waves in the entire LEC. But the way that he uses the lead that he gains off that knowledge is pretty poor. he doesn't translate that advantage very well. And then also like he just has these random bad games. Like he had a bad game in Tuskar, and he had a bad game versus Odo, where he just should be doing better than he is given everything. So he makes some like big flubs, but his general understanding of like, oh, I can push these waves, and then at this timing, like I want the wave to, to be, coming back to me so I can zone him with my Q at certain points. Like he's very smart about that type of part of the game, which could be a point of strength. It's just when you put it all together, just Koi is like not a team that even if they're a good matchup into G2, I don't think they'll win.
One of the problems I have with them as a team at the moment, it's actually something they've always had ever since they got Malrang, is, dude, he has to be one of the hardest players to predict. Not how he'll play in a series, but how well he'll do. Dude, it's so variable. It's crazy. Like, there could be a world. Here's the thing. If Koi beats G2, it'll just be because, like, Malrang will have just had 2 good games. That'll be it. Like, but I can never tell when a Malrang game's actually going to be good, Dom, because they all start the same. I don't even know what the variable is that decides it. It almost just feels like a crapshoot. It's not even a coin flip. You just roll a die, and then you see what number comes up or something,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very predicated on what champions he goes. Like, if he goes the Vi, you think he's probably gonna have a better game than if he goes something like Lee Sin. There's just some champions that it's easier for him to like hard int on.
Definitely helps, by the way, that his fucking Jarvan's magically available again, which he used to pick him when it wasn't like a primary pick. That'll help. That helps a bit.
Yeah,
that's like the Malrang champion, pretty much.
No, I mean, I still think that Malrang is like a wild card. It just. He's more like a 30-70. It's a weighted coin now compared to before. It was like a direct flip.
Because I'm definitely interested to see, because that's one angle I could maybe speculate. Like maybe if he makes the game uncomfortable enough for Yike, it opens something up and the game goes to the pace that Koi wants. Maybe that's possible. I don't know. Again, I wouldn't bet on it though. That's the problem. Koi's a really hard team at the moment to put faith in.
They're so hard to put faith in because their biggest strength before is that their bot lane was super stable and really good, and they had all these like counter picks. They were the ultimate team that would just absolutely just blue ball you in the draft, where it's like, oh, we really want to kill these guys, but they drafted fucking Soraka. Like now they're just sitting at their turrets and they're scaling, and the Shader's going to be good later on, and we just can't get enough of a lead to win the game. But when you look at the other side of things, G2 has the best bot lane when it comes to killing people in lane, and Koi is the bot lane that just dies all the time randomly. But you don't know if, like, is that going to make Koi die more? It seems like Koi just dies randomly to everyone. It just depends on if they're going to die that day or not, rather than, like, is this team playing really good, or are they doing something that's making the lane really uncomfortable for Koi? I mean, Koi looks like a team that just lost passion. Like, I when I watch them play, the types of mistakes they make, or like the types of mistakes you see somebody make when they haven't played a lot of solo queue. It's like you just look rusty. They look like permanently rusty in the bot lane. Like they're not aware of the certain timings that they used to just be very conscious of. So it's strange to watch for sure. I really don't know what's wrong with the bot lane still, but that's the part that I'm most nervous about, because even if Jagenda was having his odd bad game, or Malrang's coin flip, if you still had Larson, who plays generally well every single game, and Comp and Trimby, who play generally well every single game, you're going to be able to get to the point where one of those team fights is going to happen, and Comp will be able to potentially carry, and if he doesn't, then Larson will be able to carry. I just don't see them getting there very often.
I'm with you, mate. To me, the reason why the old Koi/Rogue was always a factor, it's exactly like you just described. Think about it. If you're AD and you're mid, pretty much always do well in the game, and you can get to team fights, and then and their team particularly, by the way, was one of those teams that's really good when you sort of fight into them. If you sort of make them have the fight, then they just team fight properly. Like mid and AD are going to clean up. Those are the roles in League of Legends designed to do that in team fights. So there used to be a logic before, but now that logic is shot, mate. Like, the whole bot lane thing is actually depressing. Like, they should have one of the best bot lanes still. But yeah, look how fucking sus they are. And look how all over the place the picks are for comp. Like, because here's one thing. I'll spin this into an abstract point, actually, which is, I actually, it was made on so many insight I revealed it. But, I revealed that I heard behind the scenes, the only reason IWDominate isn't in Koi/Rogue
it's the manager,
was basically because one of their managers had the philosophy of, first of all, he was trying to use the G2 philosophy, which in G2, supposedly, they believe that you should never keep the same lineup more than like a year or two, because they think you have to, like, sort of get fresh blood to sort of change things up and make sure people don't become complacent and, you know, stick in their ways and try and play the way they did in past years. It's not a terrible logic. I just don't really agree with it when you have an amazing squad. And then the other angle was, I do think, based on what I heard, he also wanted it to be like, let's be real. If they win with IWDominate, no one's giving this manager credit. We all know IWDominate is good for years and years. But if he wins with a new person that he's brought up from the ERLs, then he gets the credit, right? He's the genius GM. You win the coaching staff of the split, all that jazz. But the problem I have is this: the flaw with the thinking, Dom, that like you got to change it up like like G2 and put a new mixture in. What you ignore there is you just only assume it's going to work. So what you think is, right, we're going to keep all the things we were good at, and then we're going to put this new blood in. It's going to make us evolve, and we're going to be even better. It's like you actually regressed. You lost. You were lost out on it. Like the only thing you got out of this trade is, like you say, there's a very niche way in lane that Shigenda can be slightly better than the other top laners, but it's never actually going to translate in a win condition. You're not going to like win a whole game just off that laning phase. And then also he just lacks all the things that helped that scenario we just described, where you get to a late game team fight where you mid and AD, but you don't have the Gnar anymore. You don't have fucking IWDominate's Maokai. You don't have a tank. You don't have the weak set. So the downside is, if you're Koi, like mate, if Koi could make a trade tomorrow and I was the GM, I would just trade, if not for IWDominate back, for fucking that irrelevant guy, mate. I would just be like, over you come. You're the guy who's going to fix this squad. At least tomorrow I can go back to my old style. Like the problem with Koi now is they've sort of lost their identity, mate. Like I've said it on the past episodes. The identity can't just be Larson win slightly in CS. That won't win you games. You know, you got to have more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fine if bot lane wasn't inting every other game, because you have games like the Corki game for Larson where it's like he's doing pretty well. I mean, he's pretty far ahead, but you just can't fucking win because, you know, like, and, you know, he makes one mistake later on, but that's not even the crucial part. It's that his teammates are just behind. I think they're kind of obsessed with potential ceiling. I think they're deluded by the fact that by getting different players, like you just have a higher ceiling as a team.
Yes.
And that like the overall goal is to be one of like the best teams in the world. So the only way you're going to achieve that is by getting players that could actually match up with that if everything like went well, and also with the players that it seems like they you know, with the Shigenda pickup, the idea is that, oh well, if we could just teach him all the other stuff is teachable, but the laning stuff that's the intuitive part, where I can kind of get the logic there, but the reality of the situation is if you go to one of these international tournaments and you look anything like you're looking now, you're going to be shit. And then also,
absolutely.
Rogue's main strength was that they were the team that everyone always said was super tryhard in scrims. They were super tryhard. They practiced and they showed up on stage like how they practiced. So they were extremely disciplined. And the only time where this actually broke was in the summer finals, where they were actually losing a lot of scrims, and for some reason they ended up doing really well in that tournament. Most of the time they needed to train things. They wanted to try hard, play their comps, get to team fights, practice them, and then use that success in scrims to give themselves the confidence to execute on stage. They don't seem like a group of players. When you look at like Larson, when you look at Trimby, when you look at Comp, when you look at these types of people, they are not like the G2 players where you feel like they could just lose a week of scrims and it just wouldn't matter at all. Like Caps wouldn't give a fuck. He's just going to go on there and still play like the best. It looks like this team actually gets affected by their practice. You see even Larson in interviews saying things like, yeah, you know, we're going to be shit if we don't start practicing better. That's not the mark of it. That's not what somebody who's used to losing scrims sounds like. You know, he's somebody who seems to really correlate the success in scrims to success on stage. So I think that their identity is worse, but then they're also just trying to be someone that they're not. There's no shame in being the super stable team. Like, we'll shame you for it, but there's no actual shame in it.
No. I also throw this out there as well. I forgot to mention this on the G2 point earlier, but the other reason I actually think it's a little bit dangerous to do what they did, where they seem to have sort of like G2's, by experimenting, relinquished their like dominance over scrims and every game in LEC. I know this will sound weird, but because of how young pro players are, I actually think just them seeing themselves beat you in a scrim and see the victory thing on the Nexus and get kills in game, that actually gives them like a confidence. It might not even be earned. You might not actually be a worse team, but just them beating you makes them think they can beat you in the real game. I do think that's a real thing. And so the problem with that is I'm really torn, because I understand if you think you're the best in your region, in a way you are looking already to an MSI and you are planning like, yeah, but we can't just do this only against T1 and Jing Dongs. We've got to... True, but you're also actually leaving a slight window open when you do that you maybe don't win the region or someone can come closer to you. Because I do think there's a big deal. Like, I think when you hear that story about how dominant they were in the winter split, it makes sense how those official games meant, mate. People were coming into those games thinking they've already lost. Like, that's why that whole Mad Lions El Yoya thing was interesting last week, because I get the vibe the other people that weren't El Yoya and maybe Hillesang, because Hillesang's just come back in a million crazy games. The others almost were just sort of like, dude, calm down. Like, you know, we're second, who cares? Like, it was almost like that vibe, like, you know. So when you give up that aura of invincibility, it can be dangerous, I think.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, also back to the Koi thing. They were dominant for close to long enough for them to then be thinking of these types of stages, right?
Yes, exactly.
Maybe for G2, if you're like, oh, you're consistently winning in your region, but you can't win internationally, then you start making a change. Yes. But like, let's be honest, they were the team that was the serial chokers. They were serial chokers. They had one time where magically they didn't choke, possibly because there was nothing to choke on, because they thought that they were so bad going into it, so they could actually play somewhat carefree. And they just went back to just being like, I guess they got third, but it was like we said before, it was probably one of the weakest looking third place teams that we've ever had at LEC.
Yes. I mean, the other thing I'd say on the Koi angle, because you made that point about how they're trying to think of like the potential ceiling, is like, yeah, I agree. But in doing so, they've not only given up some of the flaw that they had, they were a much better consistent team before, but also, I'll throw this in there, I think it's even a flawed concept, Dom. Like, it's the reason why we have that saying in English, like, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Like, if you actually reach too much for perfection, it can ruin what you were good at. Because one thing I think is a total myth is, dude, isn't the entire way, like, the fucking LPL won worlds through having, like, limited teams that just hit their stride, basically? Like, I can think of loads of great teams in League of Legends, dude. Like, FPX, they didn't have anything close to a carry from Gimgoon in the top lane. It didn't matter. If you think of, like, IG had a player in Bowland, I think it's like a serial inter, but they made it work, and he played, like, 2 champions. Ning just happened to have exactly his champion in the meta. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these teams aren't like every player's like the god and can play all the styles. Like, they can do any... Like, essentially what Monty hypes T1 as now, where they do have all these different styles and they can't be replicated. Most of the teams in league history that were even the great ones weren't like that. You can definitely have a team, Dom, where, like we're saying about the old rogue, where you just know that the top lane's weak side and he's going to play Nara or a fucking tank or something. That's perfectly fine in league. I don't think that's as big a concern. It's definitely not something I'd panic about if you're actually good at that style. You know? Yeah,
of course. It's like, yeah, fuck, man. It really sucks. Like, our jungler's aggressive, our bot lane is super stable, our top lane can only play weak side, and our mid laner is the most consistent mage player in, like, LEC history. What a shit identity.
I know. Who's complaining about that? I know.
You know what they need to do? They need to just go watch some fucking Gen G games. They just gotta watch, like, this is who you guys are. All right, you're the team that's gonna give the first 2 Drakes, play side lanes, come into the 3rd Drake with like a 3k gold advantage, and then just beat them in a team fight. Just become Gen G. Fuck it, you don't need to be T1.
Yes. Exactly. And spoiler, since apparently people need to hear this, you don't have Keria on any of your teams, so stop trying to be T1. The joke is, the reason why we all think Keria's like the best player in the world is half of that shit shouldn't even work on T1.
That's why everyone else.
Oh, it's true. Everyone else. Who do you actually have as your best, by the way? Who's the best in the world for you?
I don't even, like, my whole thing is I just don't even know how support could ever be the best player in the world.
I know what you mean.
Fucking support.
Sure.
You know? Like, it's to me, it's crazy. And then also,
well, put it this way, here's the thing, Dom. Even though other people are going to disagree with this, I know what you mean, because essentially, right, I've always said this. It's why I don't believe, but you notice I do MVP by who I think is the best player at that point in time. I don't do it based on like actual like replacement over wins. I always say this, Dom. The way you could actually test, like for real, if someone thinks you're the best player, is if we do a draft tomorrow and you have first pick, who do you pick? Now they're all going to say, Dom, that they would pick Keria, but here's why they wouldn't.
Viper.
Yeah, exactly. The problem with that is this: like, if you take Keria, yeah, you have the best support in the world. I can still have like a very good support. That's not like he's not going to be gapped in the way that a mid laner is or an AD. Because as you say, you take what you do is you take the in reality you do what Dom did there. You take one of the main carry roles and you take whoever you think is the most absolutely cracked, because that's the best way to win League of Legends. It just is. Yeah. It just is.
Well,
guys.
Also, like, okay, so I'm somebody who said that Viper was the best in the world going into Worlds last year. I've seen nothing to make me think that he is no longer the best player in the world. Like, he's getting inted by his teammates. Big whoop. He's on a worse team. He's playing a role that requires some level of competence from his teammates, specifically the 2 worst players on his team.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, if you look at his team, it's fucking Life. It's Life and Clid. And he's still fucking insane. And any game that's close to carryable, he carries at this point. So for me, it's like, I don't jump off things that quickly. Like, I think Viper is one of the best players in the world, if not the best. But I think it's very hard to like compare players between positions, because I mean, what does Viper do wrong? Like, I feel like Viper plays the AD carry role extremely well, almost as close to perfectly as you can, and it's harder to play that role like extremely well. It's the most mechanically challenging role in team fights, especially when you're playing with people that don't play well for you and you're having to do it all by yourself. So I mean, yeah, I would probably say that somebody like Viper to me will just always be better than somebody like Keria, unless Keria just takes it to some absurd level. But recently, if you've been watching the best of fives in LCK, he's played worse than the best of fives than he did compared to the season. Like, people now, when they hear Keria, they're thinking about he's playing Kalista support and Caitlyn and all this stuff, and he's dominating every single lane. Like, he had a really good Thresh game, then he had a not so good Thresh game. He had a pretty okay Braum game, I guess. You know, he's playing a Tomcat game in there. It's not like he's not doing anything that's blowing my fucking mind at the current moment.
I'll just throw this out there as well. If people just look historically, if you look at the players most people think are the most overrated or like carried players to ever win Worlds, they're all the supports guys. It's all support or like bad top laner. That's it. There's no fucking, like, there's almost, aside from like Bengi, who even's debatable, there's no jungle player that everyone's like, he's just shit and he won Worlds. Like, even the Ning one, it's like, look, he was good in that meta. Actually, the Pure one probably should count. The problem is, I sort of, in my mind, delete DRX, even though they did win. You know what I mean? Like, in my brain, I still don't believe King and won, mate, sort of. Like, part of me still just thinks like it's a bad fever dream, and I'll wake up like, oh, the final hasn't even started. Well, of course not. Why would they win in game 5? You know what I mean? And I watch him in Korea. Like, dude, I always say this to Monty. Kingan just sold his soul to win that Worlds, dude, because he's not even good now. Like, look, he's back to just being like a bomb. Like, this is so mental. Like, he fucking won Worlds. How?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking crazy. Kingan won. It's even crazier that Pioshik won, because like, at least Kingan, like, he'll have some nice plays in lane, but Pioshik is just downright bad. Like, I watched him for a full split in LCS. He is just not a good player. He is a bad League of Legends player. There are challengers, as in like LCK challengers, Korean junglers that are better than Pioshik, that would outperform Pioshik in North America. Pioshik, maybe he provides some good vibes. Maybe he's like, maybe if all of his teammates are really insane, he can, you know, bring it together. Maybe he's like kind of, I mean, I wouldn't even say he's clutch, bro. I can't even make an excuse for it. He's just bad. Never mind.
It's no excuse. Yeah. It's no excuse. The joke is he only won Worlds because Riot made a champion that if you stand inside a circle can't be killed.
I mean, River is a better player than him.
Am I even hating on him when I say that? Isn't that sort of true what I just said there, guys? Like, essentially, if Kindred ult didn't work that way, I don't think Pioshik could ever win Worlds. I'll just say it.
Well, think about like River. Like, River's just another import. Has teammates that were not playing well, especially early on in the split. Like, Licorice was running it, and River looked significantly more effective as a player than Pioshik.
I mean, I even always thought, by the way you could tell people who had no eye test is they all said that River guy was trash when he was on Dignitas. Like, mate, he obviously looked good. What are you talking about? He actually was clearly one of the better players on that team. It's just the team wasn't well put together.
He's looked good for a while. I mean, he was good in that PSG team. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So here's the thing, Dom. Obviously, this wasn't the spiciest episode, but that's because we're not about the LEC season anymore. But we will regroup for the groups in the next one. That's the end. Cut the show off.